what it helped me do is, the entire platform kernel hardware team was about 10 people. So even though I was fairly junior, I actually got to do a lot of stuff. And I personally think that's what helped me understand a lot of things. Customer call where a customer's massive router has rebooted in the middle of a traffic session and and causing hundreds and thousands of dollars of damage per hour, right? So I actually got a chance to sit through those, debug those under pressure, with obviously some help of those other 9 people and good management, and that actually helped me understand how these things really work underneath. So the company overall was very, very supportive of experimentation. You need to go deliver this today. And I personally think this concept of, backlog based delivery is actually hinders your learning. So you need to have time to actually learn new things. Delivery was, there was some time for delivery and most time and significant amount of time for, experimentation. So when I was in school in India, I started hacking on computers. So I think part of it was just like I was really really interested in trying to figure these things out personally, and then I ended up taking positions where this was the kind of work. Eventually, I got to understand how operating systems worked, right? And then essentially, I kept pushing on almost turning my work experience into an extension of my the courses that I loved uh, during my degree, right? And always tried to get jobs where this was kind of the work, right? So I am a my main job is to work on Linux, and I've been doing this since college days, right? I've been hacking on different parts of it. Eventually, I figured out. Once you have this basic knowledge, you take a real life prototype of, let's say, running a Linux operating system, and then sort of keep hacking on it, keep tweaking on it, keep figuring out. And it's all open source, right? So as long as you can read C and C++ code, I would always consider when people say that my job is to write new code, I always am a little confused why. It's a lot of self-learning, and it's also a bit of working with the right sort of people. I had a couple of very good mentors who one of them used to work for, was a senior scientist at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, and fantastically brilliant guy. And then another one who used to be at Bell Labs. So I was just happy to, at different points in my career, I sort of worked with these sort of people, and then I learned so much from them that more than anything about technical, I learned from them how to ask the right sort of questions of things, right? Never take the answer that, oh, I don't know, this is the layer, I this something fails and this layer, I don't know what this layer does below me, so I don't know what it does and I don't really care, right? So let's go find the person who knows about it, right? In some cases maybe it's right because there's no source code for it, but in I specifically am a proponent of open source code. And so say you're in Linux world or anything, you don't have that argument, you don't have that you should never be able, you should never say that I don't know how this works. Well, everything is open, the code is there, there are tutorials for things online, go look up, figure out. And this is the sort of mindset I learned from a couple of these people who said this is all can be done. And again, these were the people who actually built a lot of the modern infrastructure that we use today and take for granted, right? These are the sort of people. So um, more than anything technical, they taught me um, the value of thinking that all this is possible. You just have to go try it yourself. So that's how, I guess, the long-winded answer to how I learned these things. As a technical leader, one of the, I guess, the primary challenge is to ensure that you sort of, your goal is to execute a project without burning people out and motivating them, right? So how you do it is you sort of, at least how I do it is, I try to make sure that everyone gets complete context of things, and they understand that there is something in them, in that project for them, learning, growth, um, and humans work very well with sort of a quasi selfish motive. When people understand there's something for them where they get to learn, right, they usually perform better. So I think it's a combination of context and the chance to learn more, right, and grow. And that happens why what I do to help people out in this case is to essentially give them not just, the customer asks to solve this one problem. I kind of explain to them the entire story. Why is this relevant? It's not like I want you to write a class or something. Of course you can write it. This class should have these four members. No, that's not the point. The point is, what problem are we trying to solve from end to end, and where does your piece fit in, and why is it that your piece is so important, right? And how will we solve this entire problem? It's not a matter of, and then I give them the things that I haven't really solved in my head, right? If I have made the design, I'll tell them this is the part. Yes, I am using these four. I'm asking you to use these four parameters, extra load, and there is, instead of 1 million connections per hour, there are 20 million connections per hour, right? Can we scale that somehow? Or will we fall over, right? You should always push people to think harder about a problem. And that's something and I've realized people are very good at thinking hard about a problem when they're motivated enough. Um, the problem with a lot of leadership is that they expect to throw something at people and expect it to be done perfectly as if they were doing it themselves. Well, then it's your fault that you haven't explained to people and motivated them enough. If you think you want it perfect as it's in your head, you should do it yourself, right? But if you think but that's not scalable. So if you need a bigger project, you need to deliver a bigger project, you need to sort of convince everyone that it's in their personal motive best, right? In their personal interest to understand this problem at the scale, so-called leader understands it, and then be an equal participant in the solution. Don't be an expert in one area, be an expert in one area and a broad expert, working functional expert in a lot of broad adjacent areas, because otherwise you'll not be able to solve the problem, right, overall, and you'll not be able to think through it. So that's my way of motivating my team folks. What happens is that people, once there's a bond of trust established, people come to you to ask for those problems, and then when you tell them to do something, they because they trust you, they will go for it. This I think I was in management for a couple of years at Riverbed. But then I realized that I'm not performing to the best of my ability. I was a first time manager, and my boss, who was a seasoned manager, basically sat me down one day and said, you look unhappy every day doing this, and so his point was, why would I lose one of my best engineers and who's happy doing what he was doing, um, and turn him into a manager and then make him unhappy every day just for the fact that this company's comp structure is built in such a way that managers are rewarded more. So interestingly, he actually flipped the comp structure of the company. It just happened to be the good idea was that the I guess I was lucky that because he was the VP of engineering, he could do it, right? But again, so for me, it was always, as long as I'm paid well, my worth, and why would I take the effort of doing program management, project management alongside, where my job, if all I am is a good engineer and maybe sort of an engineering manager, right? But I can't deal with other things, right? And that's a flaw in me. But I sort of it's important to know what you're good at and what you're not, right? And there's no point fixing what you're not good at, because you'll never be good enough to work at a level where others who are good at it work at, right? So why even bother, right? So I sort of flipped it around, and I've always been an individual contributor. So even now, I'm sort of at a senior manager director equivalent level, but I don't manage anyone, right? So the responsibilities are, I mean, the advantage of working in a core technology company is that management versus individual contributors, there's no compensation delta, right? So it doesn't really affect you per se, right? Comp wise. Um, but on the flip side, I actually have a lot of free time in my head to actually I can decide on what I want to do, right? I can do the projects that I'm part of, obviously, but I have a lot more time to actually think about how to take the project and the division forward, right? I'm Because at the level I am at, that should be my goal, right? Not just delivering this one project, thinking about what happens next and what happens the step afterwards. How not to make sure that, how to make sure there's what next can be done, right? So it actually gives me a lot of brain space to do those things, and that's that's what keeps me motivated, right? Learning new stuff, learning adjacent technologies, which is very hard if you have a lot of management responsibility, because then you are technically the person where the buck stops, right? And I mean, it's a hard job, so I don't envy them. I mean, I personally don't like to do it, because it doesn't give me the freedom to think laterally. Is that I'm sort of a subject matter expert. Um, so principals at where I am, Microsoft principal engineers, are essentially these. So they're supposed to be subject matter gurus in what they do, right? There'll be only a few people in that entire division who would be at principal, and they would know of very specific details about things, not only on your own system, not only within the company, but from outside the company as well, right? What's happening in the broader industry related to that area. So my my daily job obviously is to deliver my own projects, which I'm part of, which I'm leading. It is to make sure that the broader group essentially makes the right decisions when it comes to technology, especially with the ones which pertain to my core skill area. Making sure the architectures, that any kind of architecture that is proposed is flexible enough for any future plans. Propose new architectures which take into account a lot of customer business and where the industry is heading sort of viewpoint, as well as solving the critical customer cases, the critical, looking into problems which are cross domain. um, it's sort of a fluid role, because when things don't work, and a bunch of level of engineers have looked at it, eventually it comes to you, right? As a principal engineer. And so you basically can't, because there's no other engineers. There are no engineers above principals, right? There are, but those are very, very rare. Barely, one in 200 people will be, 1 in 300 people will be an engineer above the principal engineer level, at least at where I work. So sort of the technical problems stop with you. You have to figure out a way to solve the problem. So it's a I would say I actually spend a lot of time. I don't go by the backlog work, personally. And I'm actually encouraged not to actually look at the backlog, and then I'm going to take these two things, because thankfully my management also thinks that way. It's saying, you will solve this backlog thing, it'll take you 3 days to do it. Some junior engineer can also do it in 2 or 3 days, because you'll be doing a bunch of other things alongside, but then you'll be only doing that if you do just that, right? So yes, do some of them, but that shouldn't be your pure. But let's say there is some prototyping, some tip of the spear issues, right? Where you have to really figure this out before the project can actually go forward. Those are the things that actually I end up doing. For example, should we put 5 people on this project? Well, and this is a 6-month project, for example. Well, then someone has to figure out in 3 weeks or 2 weeks whether this is even doable, right? Can you prototype it? Can we run a small POC, a small experiment? That's when I act. That's the sort of work then I will do, right? To sort of ensure that the rest of the group is not set up for failure. That's my role here, I would say. I would say a lot of women, for some reason, which I don't know why, end up taking management roles earlier, or end up taking sort of these program management roles, product manager, program management roles. I don't know why that is. I've never figured out, because most of them that I've met are, the engineering managers are perfectly capable of being individually solid individual contributors, right? So I think this is also I think it's a testament to women's management skills in general. They are actually better. Like my wife is a much better, and she's a manager at Amazon. So in general, she's a very good manager of managing things better, right? She's technically equally capable. So just that's my own personal anecdote here. But I actually don't know. I think somehow there's been, especially in the US, it's a weird, I guess, push to women to not worry too much about, or it used to be not to look at sciences as a career, or sort of get into a more sort of easier job for some reason. I don't know why that was that. I have a feeling there was a mindset, and this is mostly an American thing, if I'm not mistaken. At least in India, that was not the case. I think that's culturally the way it's been brought up here. I have 2 girls, and I obviously push them to do maths and science and stuff every single day. To improve it, I think there are lots of things that can be done. I personally think a lot of the diversity ideas that companies are pushing are sort of useful, but not at the level they should. I think it's just mathematical. If you start from the bottom up, if you don't go doing these diversity programs, will not solve the problem per se. It will help, but it will not solve the problem, because there is I interview a lot of people, and it turns out it's a ratio of 10:1 when I interview junior engineers, of men to women, or maybe 1:5, if not 1:10. So unless you have that level going up, it's not going to, because after 4 or 5 years of work X, it's your core skill level that actually pushes you upwards, right? Yes, women do have other responsibilities also, some because of family reasons, some because of children, but it's still, if you don't have the middle layer, you will not get to the top layer. That's essentially, and the middle layer won't be there till you have the layer below it, right? So it's basically a layered cake. It's sort of a layered pyramid, right? So that's, unfortunately, that's the statistical math behind it. I mean, so I found some very good people who've given me very good advice. On the flip side, I've had my share of difficult people. Some have been, difficult to. I wouldn't say they were dishonest intellectually or anything. I would say more like some of them just, the difficulty has been the technical work they're doing. They're not interested in it, and so the output doesn't show. Right? The output doesn't show, then you pull the entire team down, right? So that's sort of the, how did I deal with them? Questioning, convincing, one-on-ones. Sometimes a couple of times it worked, sometimes it didn't work. where you have to really bring in the engineering management and ask them, I've tried my best. I It's not working out. So again, the advantage of not being an engineering manager is I don't have to worry about that at that point. I've been very fortunate to have very good managers most of the times. I've had a couple of questionable managers in my 17 years. I've mostly tried to change my profile or my job, sorry, my job or my role from under that manager. And I mean, it's very true. People say people don't change jobs, they change managers. And that's, once you have a bad manager, you know this. I have a smell detector for managers where I literally, I don't care what the coding interview and all that is fine. Either I'll make it or I won't. But I really want to have like a 1 hour discussion with the manager based on a bunch of things, right? Work-life balance is important to me. Flexibility. The manager who understands that the managers who understand that they will grow when the people who report to them grow and do better than expected, not just by delivering that one little thing, the one little project that the manager was saying, but coming up with ideas which people had not thought through, have not thought about, have not figured out. Then the manager will grow because the team will grow and the manager's like, look, these are the people who work for me, and see how motivated they are, right? As so, so that's the sort of questioning that I question a potential manager to see where they are, right? How mature they are in their sort of a mental state, right? But yeah, I mean, this is not an exact science. You make mistakes in life, so things. So I think I can help people understand a lot of things about which is similar to my core skill set, system soft, anything which actually works closer to the hardware and to the hardware software middleware layers. I can definitely help people, especially the Linux operating system is my core skill. Writing operating system software and stuff that basically tickles the hardware, and that's my skill. So I can definitely help a lot of people with hopefully with my skill set.